I am Skyla Flores, 28, a social worker in Phoenix. This Christmas, I wasn't just bringing gifts, I was bringing my greatest triumph, a program manager promotion and an engagement ring. I felt a quiet, determined hope. Stepping inside, the familiar, toxic dynamics of forced holiday connection washed over me. But I held on to my internal asset, my good news. I was ready to use my new power and self-determination to finally earn my family's approval. I thought my self-determination and success would finally change their view of me. But how quickly would my new triumph be dismissed by the same old dynamics? The house smelled of pine and expensive roast. A perfect holiday pretense. Everyone wore polite smiles, but I, the social worker, could read the room. The underlying dynamics were a live wire. My stomach tightened. I knew the familiar judgment was coming, regardless of my triumph. My mother, the matriarch, greeted me with conditional approval. She asked about my little job, ignoring my legacy of helping hundreds. I noted the cousin's smirk. The air was thick with entitlement. I needed to deploy my announcement strategy quickly to maintain my solvency. I could feel the tension mounting, a quiet challenge to my self-determination. Would I successfully navigate the familiar dynamics, or would the conversation immediately spiral into the usual, demeaning judgment? What they called my little job was my entire moral center. My asset wasn't a bank account, it was the solvency of the families I helped secure housing for. My determination and skill were used for real power, saving lives, not just accumulating a corporate legacy. They saw only low income. They valued pretense over genuine integrity. My mother saw my self-determination as weakness, a poor strategy because it didn't generate immediate, visible approval or entitlement for them. The pain was realizing they were intentionally blind to my worth. My work was my triumph. It was my hard-won peace. I knew my job had more power and integrity than their entire, fragile holiday facade. I just hoped that tonight, for once, they would choose connection over judgment. I was armed with two powerful announcements, one professional, one personal. But when I finally spoke, which one of those triumphs would my mother choose to attack first? I cleared my throat, using the same calculated skill I use to manage a room full of dynamics. Mom, everyone, I have some news. After years of determination, I'm officially a program manager at the agency. I searched their faces, hoping for genuine approval or a tiny spark of pride. The table chatter paused, a tense silence. This was the moment I'd either receive connection or judgment. My heart hammered, a direct challenge to my emotional solvency. I waited, fully exposed, for my legacy of hard work to finally be acknowledged. I was finally ready to claim my triumph. But whose voice would be the first to break the silence and deploy the first attack against my self-determination? The silence was broken by my mother's voice, sharp and dismissive. Is that the low-paid job again, Skyla? You know, the one with the noble pretense but zero asset appreciation? The question wasn't about the job, it was pure, unadulterated judgment on my choices, my legacy. A loud, snide laugh erupted from my cousin, the one whose life I quietly helped subsidize. It was the collective dynamic saying, "Your self-determination is worthless here." I felt a hot flush of pain and humiliation. My emotional solvency took an immediate hit. The fight was starting exactly as I feared. Would I let the familiar sting of their judgment force me to retreat, or would I summon the determination to push past their dismissal and announce my engagement? I took a slow breath. I remembered the exhausted but grateful faces of my clients. That was my solvency. That was the true value of my skill and determination. Their dismissive judgment meant nothing outside this toxic bubble of entitlement. I refused to let their dynamics define my worth. My legacy wasn't measured in paper asset, it was built on integrity. I managed multi-million-dollar grants for the community, a testament to my precision and power. I straightened my posture. I had earned this triumph through years of unwavering self-determination. I was not going to retreat. I forced a thin smile. Actually, Mom, it comes with a significant raise and real power. I shifted the focus immediately to the next piece of news, the one they couldn't possibly attack as easily. I had successfully defended my professional legacy. Now, would my biggest personal news, my engagement, finally force them to offer genuine approval, or would their judgment of my life choices escalate the conflict? I smiled, holding up my left hand. And the real triumph, David and I are engaged. I thought this personal legacy would finally secure their approval. The diamond glinted, a symbol of connection built on true integrity. I watched my mother's face harden, instantly calculating her attack strategy. She didn't offer a hug or even feign interest. She waved her hand dismissively. Too career-minded, Skyla. And he doesn't have a stable asset portfolio, does he? You're making bad choices. You're trading your potential for sentimental pretense. That was the pattern. Every triumph, professional or personal, was met with cynical judgment designed to undermine my self-determination. It was a silent betrayal of my worth. The wound deepened. The pain was sharp, signaling that the old dynamics were fully in power. They had dismissed both my professional and personal triumphs. What ultimate, devastating insult would my mother use next to completely shatter the last remnants of my hope for approval? I tried one last defense of my self-determination, arguing the integrity of my nonprofit work. My mother cut me off, her voice loud enough for the whole room, silencing the toxic dynamics. She looked directly at me, her eyes cold with definitive judgment. The words dropped like an axe, sharp and absolute. She stated, without a shred of pretense or approval, "You're the most useless child we have." The casual power with which she delivered the betrayal was terrifying. My carefully constructed emotional boundary shattered instantly. The entire table went into utter, stunned silence. Every relative, every judgmental glance, confirmed the verdict. It was the ultimate dismissal of my legacy. My skill, and my years of quiet sacrifice. My emotional solvency hit rock bottom. The pain was physical. The shock was overwhelming, but in that silence, a terrifying, strategic thought emerged. Would this final act of betrayal finally push me to reveal the secret asset of financial precision I'd been using to save them for years? Useless? The word triggered the montage. I saw my laptop screen, midnight, paying the family's overdue utility bills to avoid disconnection. I remembered the internal guilt that fueled my financial determination, the quiet precision used to hide my assistants, protecting their pretense of solvency. Christmas passed. I saw myself transferring my entire bonus, my only asset, to cover my cousin's credit card debt just before the holidays. It was a silent betrayal of my own future for their temporary approval. I traded my self-determination for the fragile illusion of connection within their toxic dynamics. The flashback snapped back to the present silence. I realized the true pain. I wasn't useless. I was their unacknowledged safety net, the reason their brittle legacy hadn't completely collapsed. My skill kept their entitlement alive. The realization hit me like an electric shock. I had the ultimate, financial power over them. Would I finally use my hidden asset of precision to expose their hypocrisy and reclaim my integrity? The silence was my window. My social worker skill switched from crisis intervention to pure, internal strategy. I began an immediate calculus, every hidden payment, every late fee I covered. I recalled the dates and dollar amounts with cold, professional precision. The file in my mind labeled family financial bailouts opened. There was the $8,000 I paid to stop the foreclosure on my uncle's condo, done to protect the family's fragile legacy and pretense. They used my guilt over the useless title as their ultimate tool of power. I realized the scope of their entitlement was terrifying. My own savings, my future asset and solvency, had been systematically drained to maintain their toxic dynamics. Yet, this hidden labor gave me a counter-weapon, the documented truth. The determination solidified. I was their safety net, the one they mocked while secretly needing. The $15,000 in back taxes. The $5,000 emergency loan for the car I never drove. Every one of their moments of triumph was secretly subsidized by my financial precision and self-sacrificing integrity. My goal shifted from winning their approval to establishing absolute self-determination. The words I would speak were not about revenge, but about boundaries. I would use this financial data as the final, unassailable boundary marker, ensuring my future peace. My heart still ached from the useless judgment, but my mind was utterly clear. I knew the damage this truth would cause, but the pain of remaining silent was now greater than the fear of speaking the truth. I prepared the ultimate, factual betrayal of their secret. I had compiled the definitive, documented proof of my legacy of sacrifice. Now that I had all the facts, would I have the power and determination to withstand the fallout when I used my financial precision to expose their hypocrisy to the entire family? I met my mother's gaze, the useless judgment still hanging in the air. I understand you value usefulness in terms of asset and social standing, I stated, my voice dangerously calm. But your metric is flawed. I actually kept this fragile legacy afloat. I pulled out my phone, displaying a simple spreadsheet. The visual precision was key. Before you judge my self-determination again, let's review the hidden balance sheet of your entitlement. I pointed to a figure. A check for $15,300 paid to the IRS for the family trust's back taxes. My money, a gasp rippled through the table. My mother's polite pretense faltered, her face draining of color. The collective, toxic dynamics of the room began to collapse under the weight of factual integrity. They relied on my guilt and silence, now I was breaking the code. I turned to my smirking cousin. And Cousin Mark, that emergency loan of $5,000 you said was for a client? It actually paid off your gambling debt, 2 days before I announced my triumph. His face went scarlet. The betrayal was no longer mine alone, it was theirs, made public by my determination. I explained the painful truth, you only valued me based on your entitlement. I used my skill and solvency not for myself, but for your approval. My so-called useless job was the reason this family didn't lose everything. I was your asset, my voice didn't waver. The objective wasn't revenge, it was establishing a final, unassailable boundary. I had used the ultimate financial precision to expose their low expectations and seize back my power. The conversation was over. The battlefield was cleared. I had exposed their secret and reclaimed my worth. But now that I had revealed my power and their fragility, would I have the determination to implement the ultimate boundary and walk away forever? Their shock was deep, but momentary. Soon, the familiar dynamics of gaslighting and counter-accusations would begin. I couldn't allow that. My objective was achieved, the truth was spoken, my integrity restored. I pushed back my chair, the scrape loud in the silent room. I looked at my mother, who was struggling to regain her power. This ends now. My role as your unacknowledged financial asset ends tonight. This is not about revenge, it's about self-determination. I used the formal, professional tone of a contract termination. The automatic transfers, the emergency bailout payments, the quiet covering of your entitlement, all of it stops immediately. I was implementing the strictest boundary with surgical precision. My emotional solvency depended on this immediate, clean severing. I specifically addressed my cousin. Mark, your final warning. The next time your guilt or debt threatens the family legacy, I will not intervene. You will face the consequences of your choices. This is my new strategy. I gave them no room for argument or gaslighting. My future triumph will be built on my own terms. I will use my skill and my financial asset to build my own legacy, one based on the truth, not your years of pretense. This action was not a loss of connection, it was the birth of true peace. I didn't wait for a response. I calmly reached for my coat and the small gift I brought. The ultimate act of self-determination is walking away when you have nothing left to prove. The pain was still there, but it was the cleansing pain of finality. My focus was on the door. Every step was a declaration of my new power. I was leaving behind the burden of their judgment and their toxic dynamics. This was the real Christmas rebirth. I walked out, leaving the stunned silence and their crumbling legacy behind. I had walked out, claiming my self-determination and final peace. But how quickly would my family deploy their counterattack strategy after my exit, and would I have the determination to maintain my new, strict boundary? The shock of the useless judgment had worn off. In its place, a cold, clinical determination settled. I realized they had just handed me the key to my own liberation. I had exposed their hypocrisy, and now I had the power to dictate the terms of my exit. I stood up slowly, deliberately, meeting every single pair of eyes around the table. My posture was straight, no longer bent by years of seeking their conditional approval. The silence returned, more charged than before. This was not a plea for connection, it was a demonstration of absolute self-determination. My internal script was ready. Every figure, every date I had mentally reviewed was a bullet point in my dismantling strategy. I was using my social worker's skill in crisis management against my own family's toxic dynamics. My integrity would be weaponized with surgical precision. I glanced at my phone, still displaying the spreadsheet of their debts, my secret asset. This data was proof that my so-called low-paid job was the financial solvency keeping their house, their legacy, and their carefully curated pretense of wealth intact. The truth was my greatest power. I saw a flicker of pain in my mother's eyes, not guilt, but a sudden fear of exposure. That brief moment of vulnerability confirmed my determination. The time for seeking their approval was long past. It was time for a final, non-negotiable boundary. I inhaled deeply, centering myself. This action was the final act of my rebirth. The air tasted clean, despite the heavy roast smells. The betrayal they inflicted had armed me for this triumph. I was about to speak, not to wound, but to heal myself through final, unassailable truth. My composure was a suit of armor forged in fire. Now that I had fully seized the power in the silence, would the facts I was about to deliver truly break their toxic legacy beyond repair? I cleared my throat, forcing the finality into my voice. Since you feel entitled to judge my worth based on financial asset and utility, let's talk about my contributions to the family legacy. I displayed the spreadsheet on my phone. My strategy was simple, undeniable facts first. On November 12, 2023, I made an electronic transfer of $15,300 to the Internal Revenue Service. I paused, letting the precision of the dollar amount land. That wasn't for me. That was to clear the family trust's back taxes and prevent a disastrous public lien on this very house. My mother's mouth opened slightly, a silent betrayal in her own shock. She couldn't immediately deny the fact, the date and the amount were too precise. The power had completely shifted. The collective family dynamics were now frozen in fear of what would come next. Moving on. Cousin Mark, you were bragging about your Caribbean cruise. Did you know the emergency credit card you maxed out, the one I quietly funded, was used to pay off the cruise and your previous guilt-driven debts? Mark flinched, confirming the truth. I was the ghost in their financial machine. The reason they maintained their pretense of financial solvency and social approval was my constant, unseen work. My useless social work skill was being used to do their dirty work with administrative precision. Every time I showed determination in my career, you responded with judgment. Every time you spent recklessly, I used my meager salary as your emergency asset. I paused, my voice rising slightly. You prefer my financial connection to my actual integrity, I had exposed the tip of the iceberg, confirming my power through irrefutable data. But how would they react when I delivered the final, non-negotiable boundary that would permanently sever my financial connection to their crumbling legacy? The facts had silenced them. Now, I delivered the emotional verdict. That is the financial legacy you called useless. It wasn't the money that hurt, it was the betrayal. You took my asset while denying my self-determination. That pain is unforgivable. My promotion was a professional triumph. My fiancé is a partner who values my integrity and skill. I spoke with the clear determination of someone who has nothing left to lose. Yet, you valued their entitlement and their pretense of solvency more than my actual life. My mother tried a final, desperate move, leaning into the old toxic dynamics. Skyla, don't be dramatic. It's family connection. We were testing your loyalty. I cut her off sharply, using my newfound power. No. That was manipulation, not connection. I looked her straight in the eye. My life is now protected by a final, unassailable boundary. The automatic financial support stops tonight. You will all face the consequences of your financial judgment without my help. My strategy was irreversible, my precision absolute. I am choosing my peace. I am choosing my own legacy. The determination I used to save your house will now be used to build mine, with David. I was calm, centered, and radiating the triumph of self-rescue. Their approval was finally irrelevant. I calmly picked up my coat. I gave one last look at the table, the stunned faces, the ruin of their pretense. This was my ultimate act of self-determination. The guilt was gone, replaced by a fierce, cleansing sense of freedom. I walked towards the door, leaving the pain behind. I had walked away, establishing a final boundary with irreversible precision. But would my family, consumed by their entitlement and loss of my asset, ever acknowledge the true cost of their betrayal? I was at the door when my mother's voice, desperate now, not scornful, cut through the silence. You walk out that door, Skyla, and we're telling everyone the real truth, that your little job gives you zero asset appreciation and you're still useless. I turned slowly. My determination was steel cold. Mother, that strategy is already useless. I gave you the facts because I know how you operate. I used my best crisis intervention skill to neutralize her attack. I smiled faintly. Let me give you the financial foresight now. I addressed Mark directly. Mark, that $5,000 I paid for your gambling debt? I paid it via a structured loan document that automatically converts to a legal IOU when my payments stop. The precision was terrifying. The first payment is due in 3 days. You lose your car. And mother, I continued, the $8,000 I paid for Uncle George's condo foreclosure? That was the collateral. When your family trust's assets were leveraged, I was the guarantor. The bank is legally mandated to audit the trust's financial solvency without my monthly transfers. The fear in her eyes deepened. It wasn't just losing my approval, it was the total collapse of her carefully managed pretense and the family legacy. Your entire operation, your social integrity, relies on my quiet contributions. You called me useless, but I was your core financial asset. Your final judgment of me was the final betrayal of my effort. I am now officially using my legal power to ensure my future peace. I looked at them, taking in the full sight of their ruined dynamics. Goodbye. I hope the roast was worth it. I left them with the cold precision of their impending financial collapse. But would the dramatic exit be enough? Or would the next day bring new attempts at gaslighting and manipulation to restore their lost financial power? The cold air hit my face. It was cleansing. I had exposed their pretense and their toxic dynamics. The useless child had just delivered the final, devastating judgment against their financial legacy. The sense of triumph was overwhelming, replacing the old, familiar pain. My objective was complete, not just revenge, but establishing a permanent boundary for my self-determination. My carefully calculated strategy had utilized financial precision to achieve ultimate emotional peace. My emotional solvency was restored, no longer reliant on their fleeting approval. I pulled out my phone and saw David's waiting text, "Ready when you are. Your integrity is your power." That message was worth more than all their combined asset. That was true connection. The guilt I'd carried for years felt foolish, a vestige of their manufactured power. I looked back at the house, a monument to false entitlement. I didn't see the warmth of the holidays, I saw the chilling reality of years of betrayal. The silence from within told me the toxic dynamics were temporarily shattered. This was the final, unassailable triumph of my rebirth. My journey of self-determination was just beginning. I had used their own rules, money and status, to achieve my freedom. I felt the surge of fresh power. My future legacy would not be defined by their low expectations, but by my unwavering determination to be happy. I got into David's car. The engine started, a powerful, clean sound. We pulled away from the curb. The house shrunk in the rearview mirror. It was more than a drive, it was a physical severing of the toxic connection. I was gone. The old Skyla was gone. The final blow was delivered, and I was free. But even with my new peace and self-determination, would the echoes of their final, desperate attempts to regain their power ever truly fade? The car heater felt warm, the silence beside David felt safe. The house, that monument to toxic dynamics and shattered integrity, was rapidly shrinking in the rearview mirror. Every inch we drove was a physical severing of the chains of their judgment and low expectations. David reached across the console and squeezed my hand. He didn't need to speak, his quiet approval validated my decade of struggle more than any word from my mother ever could. He saw my skill and self-determination as strengths, not threats to his own asset or power. The sharp pain of the useless insult still lingered, but the crushing weight of guilt, the feeling that I owed them my solvency and my life, was finally gone. I had used my final strategy to reclaim my legacy. It was a triumph of self-worth over entitlement. The past was a heavy door that had just slammed shut. The future was an open road, defined by my own determination and the true connection with David. I was a survivor, not a victim. The rebirth was complete. The immediate pain was fading, replaced by the peace of the open road. But what was the first, definitive step I needed to take in the real world to ensure my new boundary with my family was absolutely legally unassailable? I knew emotion wasn't enough. My rebirth needed legal teeth. David and I met with his lawyer. The goal: turn my verbal boundary into an unassailable legal strategy. My family's toxic dynamics demanded absolute precision in every document. The first move was a cease and desist letter. My lawyer specialized in high-net-worth family disputes. The letter was clinical, detailing the financial asset transfers and demanding no further connection or contact, under threat of legal action for harassment. I made sure the family trust's back taxes, the $15,300, were documented as a non-refundable gift to avoid any legal claim to repayment that could give them leverage. My financial precision was now solely focused on protecting my own integrity and solvency. Mark's $5,000 debt was legally formalized. I instructed the lawyer to file the IOU immediately, ensuring his car title was legally at risk. This wasn't about the money, it was about the legal power to enforce my boundary and demonstrate the real consequences of his entitlement. My next practical step was total financial isolation. I changed all my banking institutions, closing old accounts and opening new ones solely in my name, with no familial connection. I used my skill to build a financial fortress, impervious to their desperate attempts at regaining control. I systematically deleted all records of our financial transactions on my end, email transfers, Venmo records, shared cloud files. I wiped the slate clean of their guilt and my past sacrifices, solidifying the mental boundary as well as the physical. My mother knew my work address. I immediately requested internal transfer to a different satellite office, citing the need for a change of pace. This was an act of absolute self-determination, ensuring my daily life remained free from their potential stalking or final, desperate pleas for approval. That night, I finalized our prenup, ensuring my future asset and David's were protected from any familial financial fallout. I was protecting my triumph and our new legacy with the same fierce determination I had used to expose their pretense. The practical actions brought a deep, physical sense of peace. The fear was replaced by confidence. My social work skill had been deployed to ensure my own rebirth. I had built a fireproof boundary. The only thing left was to wait for their inevitable, toxic response. My phone was quiet. I knew the silence wouldn't last. The moment they realized the automated payments had not gone through, the power struggle would reignite. But this time, I had legal solvency and emotional armor. I was ready for the next round of their judgment. I looked at the ring on my finger, a symbol of true connection built on mutual integrity. The story of my betrayal was now the foundation of my triumph. I closed my laptop, the spreadsheet minimized. The financial precision had served its purpose. I was safe, protected, and finally free. The cost was the loss of a fake family, but the gain was a real life. The pain was replaced by a quiet, deep-seated confidence that my skill and my chosen legacy would succeed. I had secured my boundary with legal precision and unwavering determination. But what truly terrifying financial consequence would my mother face first, and how would she attempt to use her emotional power to break my new peace? The weeks after my final act of self-determination were strangely quiet. No calls. No frantic emails. It was the silence of a grave, the true death of the relationship. That silence was my first true taste of peace, but it was terribly lonely. I wasn't grieving the loss of them, I was grieving the loss of the idea of a loving family legacy. The pain was the recognition that the decades of seeking their approval and offering my asset were for a pretense that never existed. My integrity felt fully restored, but at a huge cost. I had to face the reality that my mother's judgment had been her final, hurtful gift. I was now free of their toxic dynamics, but I had lost the childhood connection I desperately wanted to salvage. The biggest change was the absence of guilt. Without that manufactured lever, their power over me vanished. My carefully planned strategy, executed with financial precision, had surgically removed their most potent weapon. My determination had saved me. I was finally operating with full emotional solvency. My career skill felt validated not by their approval, but by the success of my own life crisis management. This was the true triumph, the silent, internal rebirth of the woman I was meant to be. The grief was a necessary part of the healing. You can't escape a toxic system without mourning the hope you had for it. I stood up, feeling lighter, finally ready to focus on building a future defined by my own legacy of peace and self-respect. I had accepted the necessary grief and claimed my peace. Now that the emotional storm had passed, how would my new determination translate into the final, enduring chapter of my own personal legacy and triumph? I embraced the transfer to the new office. It wasn't running, it was strategic retreat, a fortress for my self-determination. My social work skill felt sharper, now that its asset wasn't being drained by familial toxic dynamics. I channeled my fierce determination into my career. 3 months later, I received my second major promotion. This triumph felt entirely mine, uncontaminated by the need for my mother's approval. The salary jump meant real financial solvency, a stark contrast to the pretense of my family's crumbling legacy. David was my anchor. He never questioned my strategy or my boundary. He celebrated my integrity, not my financial asset. Our connection was built on mutual respect, a foundation far stronger than the manufactured guilt and entitlement that had defined my past. We bought a small house, putting down a deposit using my completely clean savings. Signing those papers was the final severing of my financial connection to the past. This house was a concrete symbol of my rebirth, a tangible result of my determination. My new family was David and the friends who championed my self-determination, people who saw my skill and loved me without conditional approval. This was where true peace resided, not in the empty formality of a holiday dinner, but in genuine, earned connection. The sharp pain of my family's betrayal softened into a dull scar. It was a reminder of my power, not my weakness. I realized their final, cruel judgment had actually been my liberation, setting me free to pursue my own legacy with unflinching integrity. I received an update from the lawyer. Mark had lost his car. The bank was scrutinizing the family trust's accounts for financial precision. Their self-inflicted damage proved my initial strategy correct. My skill for forecasting disaster saved me from being pulled back into their entitlement vortex. The memory of the Christmas dinner was now filed under lessons learned. I felt no guilt, only certainty. I had used the ultimate revenge, success, built on my own terms. My new life was the ultimate triumph over their toxic legacy. I had built my new legacy on the foundation of my own integrity and determination. But with my ultimate triumph secured, what final, unexpected news would I receive that would prove their toxic dynamics had truly, irrevocably crashed? I knew the quiet wouldn't last. The money, or lack thereof, was their true Achilles heel. Precisely 72 hours after I walked out, my phone exploded. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from Mark. The toxic dynamics were reactivating, confirming my initial strategy. The first text from my mother was a predictable blend of guilt and judgment. "Skyla, this is ridiculous. You are ruining your father's legacy. That money was only temporarily yours. Call me now, or I swear, you'll regret this." Her power was fading, replaced by raw desperation and entitlement. Mark's text was simpler, driven purely by self-interest and fear. "Skyla, the bank called about the car loan. You have to make that $5,000 payment immediately. You can't let me lose the car. Where's your family connection?" His reliance on my asset was exposed for the transactional pretense it truly was. I sat at my new, quiet desk and simply pressed the block contact button for both. My determination was absolute. I wouldn't let their crisis drag me back into their toxic dynamics. This silence was my new, powerful boundary, enforced with surgical precision. Minutes later, David's lawyer emailed the confirmation. The cease and desist letter had been hand-delivered. This legal shield solidified my emotional solvency. My legal strategy was working. The financial pain they inflicted was now rebounding directly onto their own legacy. I finally allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Their shock proved my integrity was never the issue, their sense of entitlement was. The final, cruel judgment they passed had only led to their swift financial downfall. I had turned their betrayal into my triumph. I knew the money was the critical factor. The car was just the first domino. The real hit would be the family trust audit triggered by the missed collateral payment I'd flagged. Their pretense of wealth was about to crumble under true financial precision. David called. "Everything okay?" His voice was steady, a clear voice in the storm of their toxic dynamics. "It is now," I replied. "The boundary is holding." His unwavering support was the ultimate asset, far surpassing the financial leverage I had just cut off. The frantic texts and calls were a testament to my ultimate power, the power to walk away. This wasn't revenge, but rebirth. The old me, seeking their approval, was dead. The new me, living with integrity and self-determination, was truly alive. I had successfully weathered the first, frantic wave of their desperate attempts to regain power. But what terrifying consequence would I witness next, the loss of the car, or the collapse of their entire financial legacy, and how would my new determination hold up against their final, public smear campaign? The silence was broken by my lawyer, not my mother. Mark had missed the payment, and the repo man had seized his cherished car. The financial precision of my IOU meant swift, irreversible justice. My heart felt a pang, not of guilt, but of finality. My mother, unable to reach me, turned to public dynamics. She posted a vague, melodramatic judgment on social media about unsupportive children and family betrayal. It was a desperate grab for external approval, a performance of her familiar pretense of victimhood. David immediately shut down his social media. "She's fishing for a reaction, Skyla. Your integrity speaks louder than her noise." His practical strategy protected my new boundary. I felt immense gratitude for his true connection, contrasting with their toxic dynamics. The real, terrifying shoe dropped when the lawyer called again. The bank had noticed the collateral problem and was initiating the full audit of the family trust. The power of my initial asset disclosure was now the detonator for their entire financial legacy. I realized the true depth of their pretense. The family solvency was a house of cards, constantly propped up by my useless social worker salary. Their entitlement had blinded them to the inevitable consequences of their own recklessness. I felt a strange sense of calm. The whole situation was now purely legal, a consequence of their poor judgment. I was no longer emotionally invested in their toxic dynamics. My determination to maintain my boundary was stronger than any remaining emotional connection. I instructed my lawyer to send a final letter of precision to the bank, reiterating my non-involvement and documenting the past betrayal. I was ensuring that the full force of the law focused on the trust, solidifying my rebirth and my new legacy. The biggest change was the complete absence of guilt. I had done everything with integrity. The pain they were experiencing was the direct result of their own strategy of using and devaluing me. This was not revenge, this was natural consequence. I had won the legal battle and the internal war for my self-determination. The true measure of my skill was not my salary, but my ability to dismantle years of toxic dynamics with a single, precise strategy. This was my ultimate triumph. The final chapter of their financial legacy was being written by the bank, not me. But would their inevitable final act, a desperate, manipulative attempt at a face-to-face connection, be the moment I truly faltered, or my ultimate confirmation of self-determination? With the toxic noise gone, I could finally hear my real friends. Dinner parties were different now. No whispers of family asset drama, no frantic cover-ups. Just genuine laughter and real connection. This community saw my integrity, not my use as an asset. David and I sat across from each other, planning our wedding. No demands, no judgment on the guest list, which was short. His approval was a quiet, constant hum of support. His trust was the ultimate financial and emotional solvency I'd ever need. At work, I spearheaded a major fundraising campaign, using the same precision and strategy I'd used to dismantle my family's pretense. This time, the power was constructive. My determination was fueled by purpose, not pain. This was my new, productive legacy. I heard indirectly that Mark was riding the bus to a new, low-paying job, a direct consequence of his entitlement. It was a small, bittersweet triumph. He had finally been forced to experience the reality he had always sneered at, without my asset bailout. The memory of the Christmas dinner and the final, cruel judgment still surfaced, but without the accompanying guilt. The pain was now just a fact of the past. My self-determination had healed that wound, replacing obligation with hard-won freedom. Maintaining the strict no-contact boundary was key. Every day without their toxic dynamics was a small victory, proving that complete severance was the only way to achieve peace and complete my rebirth. The precision was the protection. I created a new, complex system for my financial life, a true reflection of my own asset management skill. No shared accounts, layered security, and an ironclad prenup. My financial fortress was a symbol of my refusal to ever be financially exploited again. For the first time, I shared the whole story of the betrayal with my closest, non-judgmental friends. Naming the toxic legacy and the emotional pain in a safe space was profoundly healing. Their simple belief in my integrity was better than any forced family connection. I looked in the mirror and didn't see the burdened, desperate for approval Skyla anymore. I saw a woman forged by determination and strategy. The woman who had achieved ultimate solvency and ultimate power, the power to say no. Shopping for my wedding dress felt like a truly free act. It was about choosing my happiness, not fitting into a family pretense. I was building my own ceremonial legacy, free from the shadow of their toxic dynamics. It was a quiet, deep, personal triumph. I finally forgave myself for the years I spent trying to earn their love. The guilt was a tool they wielded, and I was no longer holding the handle. My self-determination was the key to unlocking this final layer of peace. I saw the collapse of their lives, Mark's car, the bank audit, not with malice, but with clarity. They were reaping what they sowed. My role was complete. My hands were clean, my legacy protected by my own unwavering determination. My focus shifted entirely from fighting the past to building the future. Every step, from buying a couch to planning the honeymoon, was an act of self-determination, a quiet triumph over the toxic narrative they had tried to write for me. The social worker who managed my own life crisis with such skill and precision had emerged. I had leveraged my emotional intelligence to achieve true solvency. The rebirth was not just an event, it was my new identity. I had one. Not by being cruel, but by being strategically honest. My revenge wasn't loud, it was the quiet, undeniable success of my self-determination. I was finally free. My new life was a testament to my integrity and determination. But with the bank audit now in full swing, would my mother and the rest of the family face the ultimate judgment, the public collapse of their entire social legacy, and how would I choose to react to their final, desperate fall? 6 months passed. The bank audit confirmed the family trust was dissolving. Then came the final, predictable move, a handwritten note asking for one final coffee to find peace. I knew it wasn't for connection, it was a desperate last gasp for power. I consulted David and my lawyer. The strategy was simple: go, maintain my boundary, and offer nothing but the truth. This meeting wasn't for their approval or forgiveness. It was the final, definitive act of my self-determination, a quiet, surgical strike of precision. The cafe was crowded. My mother looked small, frail, a carefully crafted pretense of vulnerability. She spoke first, reciting a script of regret, peppered with veiled references to my financial asset and the family legacy she claimed I had destroyed. I cut her off. I did not destroy the legacy. Your lifelong entitlement and poor judgment did. I simply stopped paying for your choices. That money was my solvency, and you spent years treating me like a disposable asset. The truth, delivered with integrity, was a physical shock to her. You framed my efforts as a weapon and my life as a betrayal. You never saw my skill, you only saw my usefulness. The pain I caused was the pain of a locked door. I owe you nothing but the knowledge that I am finally free. My voice was calm, devoid of the emotional guilt she was seeking to exploit. She tried one final plea for family connection, but I didn't flinch. There is no reconciliation for a relationship based on pretense. My determination is to build a new life. Your legacy is your choice, mine is my rebirth. I offered a clinical goodbye, not a loving one. I stood up and walked away. I didn't look back. The silence in the car was beautiful, filled with hard-won peace. This meeting cemented the final boundary. I had exercised my ultimate power, the power to choose myself, without regret or guilt. David hugged me when I got home. You were magnificent. You spoke your truth. That was the only approval I needed. His constant belief in my self-determination was the true asset of my new life, eclipsing their toxic dynamics forever. My revenge was complete. It was the triumph of integrity over pretense, solvency over debt, and self-determination over judgment. My skill had built a new, beautiful legacy. Their pain was the consequence of their own strategy. I closed the chapter. My wedding was approaching, a true celebration of my rebirth and new connection. The only legacy I cared about was the one I was building with David, based on mutual respect and unshakable determination. They had called me useless, but my skill had dismantled their empire. They had tried to burden me with guilt, but I had found peace. They had offered betrayal, and I had chosen self-determination. The final score was settled. The truth, delivered with cold precision, was the final revenge. It was a refusal to participate in the lie anymore. I had nothing left to prove to them, only a beautiful, honest life left to live for myself. I had secured my peace and my self-determination, a quiet triumph over years of manipulation. But what lasting wisdom did I gain from this journey of revenge and rebirth? And what is the one most important piece of advice I can offer to anyone still trapped by a toxic family's legacy? It's been a year since that Christmas dinner, the day I reclaimed my solvency and my life. Looking back, the true triumph wasn't the financial blow I dealt, but the emotional rebirth I achieved. I broke the cycle of their toxic dynamics and redefined my own legacy. My family thought power was in control and conditional approval. I learned that true power lies in absolute self-determination, the strength to walk away from what poisons you. Your most valuable asset is your integrity, not your bank balance. The biggest lesson? Don't seek emotional revenge, seek legal and financial precision. My strategy was successful because it was clinical, based on facts, not the pain or guilt they tried to weaponize. Emotional solvency followed financial solvency. My mother's final judgment, calling me useless, was the final key. It unlocked the certainty that their entire life was a pretense. They were incapable of offering genuine connection. Accepting that truth brought profound peace, even if it was a peace born of loss. They dismissed my skill as a social worker, but I used that expertise to navigate my own crisis. I identified the toxic dynamics, isolated the financial asset vulnerabilities, and executed the withdrawal. Never let anyone devalue the skill that saves your life. If you are trapped by a family's entitlement, remember this: your determination is your shield. Stop sacrificing your solvency, financial and emotional, for their conditional approval. Set the boundary, and be prepared for the chaos that follows. It's the cost of your freedom. The only thing that kept me tied to them was manufactured guilt. Understand that guilt is a lever, not a moral truth. They created it to sustain their power and their toxic legacy. When you choose self-determination, you smash that lever completely. The highlight of this rebirth is David. He is the living symbol of what a real, healthy connection looks like. He celebrated my integrity, never tried to leverage my pain. Seek out the people who validate your self-determination, not those who demand your submission. My revenge wasn't the collapse of their legacy, that was their choice. My revenge was my triumph. It was showing them, and myself, that I was not useless. My life, built with precision and determination on my terms, is the ultimate, quiet act of defiance. David and I are standing in the sunlit living room of our new home. The keys feel heavy, real. This house, built entirely on my skill and honest asset, is my true legacy. It's quiet, full of peace, and free from any external judgment. The past is truly the past. My mother's desperate coffee meeting, Mark's lost car, the vanishing trust fund, they are just case studies in toxic dynamics. My current focus is the present, defined by integrity, and the future, defined by hope. I found my peace and my power by choosing my self-determination over their toxic legacy. So, if I could sum up my entire journey of betrayal and triumph into one final, guiding principle for those still seeking their own rebirth, what ultimate piece of wisdom would I leave you with? My triumph is complete, but my story is only valuable if it serves as a roadmap for your own rebirth. I've distilled my journey of betrayal and self-determination into 5 core lessons, principles that grant you emotional solvency and power. Lesson 1. Your skill is your ultimate asset. Don't let toxic people devalue the expertise that sustains you. Their judgment against your career is just a mechanism to maintain their power over your financial asset. Trust your training and your precision. Lesson 2. A clear boundary is not cruel, it is necessary peace. Toxic dynamics rely on porous boundaries. Your determination to enforce no is the most powerful act of self-determination. Expect chaos, except that chaos is the cost of your freedom. Lesson 3. Guilt is a manipulative lever, not a moral connection. Never let family use manufactured guilt to control your asset or your choices. Their manufactured pretense of pain is designed to undermine your integrity and make you give up your solvency. Lesson 4. Your legacy is your choice, not their entitlement. You don't owe them a life of servitude to their toxic legacy. Break the betrayal cycle. Build a life based on mutual respect and genuine connection. This is your ultimate triumph. Lesson 5. Your strategy for escape is an act of self-love. Use the cold precision of logic, legal and financial, to execute your freedom. This is the highest form of self-care. It's not revenge, it's self-determination realized through integrity. These 5 lessons built my legacy of self-determination. Now, if this story of financial precision and emotional rebirth resonated with you, what is the one thing you are going to change today to reclaim your own power?